I don't think it's surprising that when it comes to a game like Phighting, the way characters work in a more casual, open environment are far more different than in a competitive scrim environment. And a lot of characters and how they work in opens and scrims really do push this in different levels. A character like Vinestaff can be absolutely annoying and sometimes even broken in opens, mostly because she was able to get out of control in like 30 seconds, and yet, she is widely considered the worst character in the game when you take into account how she is in scrims, as it becomes far more difficult to do her gameplay, and she is a high priority target, always being unchecked every time. Then there is a character like Medkit, who seems underwhelming in opens and definitely much harder to pilot compared to a character as easy as Vinestaff, but in scrims, he is by far considered one of the best characters in many balance patches, mostly due to Divine Resurrection, but also having a bunch of other great tools as a healer. And speaking of Medkit, there's always a consistent top character in most tier lists by competitive players. Yeah, it's Subspace. Subspace is probably the biggest example of this effect, and today I will explain the difference between sub in opens and sub in scrims, and why it's one of the things I love about this game, and why is he actually like this in both environments. I will assume you know how Subspace's moves work, as doing an overview would take up like 3 minutes of this video in general, so let's get right into how Sub is in opens. And he is pretty much the worst character in opens. Like, it's almost laughably funny. Now, he isn't awful per se, as he does have some advantages. He is usually the most reliable character against the tanks of Banhammer and Katana, which isn't as big as you might think in opens, but still a great upside, as Katana is arguably one of the best opens characters in the game. Subspace can also have some decent survivability thanks to his M2 being an amazing self-defense option up close, and his E being a great mobility option, albeit it is affected by its long cooldown compared to most other characters' mobility options. And not only that, vulnerability and poison on most of his attacks allow himself as a debuffer and damage chipper to really soften up enemies for your teammates so they can deal with them easier. This will be a bit of a flaw to this in opens, as I will explain later, but it's still neat to him. Combined with those tools, his ult, while inconsistent, can catch people off guard and can set up for some great plays on Conquer and Escort, especially if people run into the big glowing shining star.
Holy shit!
There's just one big problem with Subspace, however. Dives. Dive characters are the absolute meta of an open server, as opens tend to have basically little teamwork and can't really cooperate to deal with dives due to the skill discrepancies that can occur, but also just teamwork in opens barely exist. Because of this, the fighters that get up to your face and start clawing at you or ranged characters are always going to be the best and most consistent options. Think of characters like Biograph, Slingshot, Shuriken, and many more options. Subspace is arguably the most vulnerable fighter for this very reason alone. Yes, E is a great tool to get away, and M2 can pull the fighters up close off of you, but outside of that, you can't really kill those who come close, and they'll always be able to kill you far quicker, even after they get M2'd, because what else can you do outside of E and run away? Unless a healer is healing you, Sub cannot output enough damage and cannot live for long enough to really handle them, unless they are just bad at trying to kill you. And considering Open's teamwork is more like a myth, good luck doing it on your own. Biograph, Skateboard, and Shuriken can all shred Subspace completely if they just know how the character functions. Some like Hyper Laser, Rocket, and Slingshot can just evade you even easier and start draining your HP effortlessly too. And for a character that has no shield like Subspace, you really need as much HP as you can get. And remember when I said he is very good against the tanks? Well, yeah, he is, but I didn't mention the fact he basically loses to almost every other fighter in the game unless they just don't go for you or they flat out miss almost all of their moves. And even then, Katana can also hook you in and force you to use mobility moves because he can absolutely tear you apart if he procs his passive onto you. But you might say, Subspace adds vulnerability and poison damage. The problem is, you need to rely on your teammates to really put in the damage to take advantage of this. And look, this is not against anyone, but teamwork in opens is just genuinely really difficult unless you are with your buddies in a voice call or in a party. But that's also really inconsistent, because it's a party. You can get far more value playing a more independent character with high damage or a dive that can cleave through opponents compared to Subspace, who relies on his teammates to do a lot of his damage and has some of the worst self-defense in the game. Why play a character that has no chance against the aggressive characters when you can play one of those characters yourself? Almost any ranged or melee can output far more effectiveness for your team. There are some more weaknesses to Subspace, like how awful he is on Annihilate and a ton of other stuff, but this is like the simple rundown version because he is just that bad. For these big downsides, Subspace is often considered the worst opens character in the game. You can maybe make an argument for Boombox or Medkit being worse, but Boombox can at least have some great diving in opens, and Medkit still has good damage and healing in opens. Then again, most of the character's output depends on the player themselves and not the character itself, but generally speaking, Subspace is the weakest by a significant margin. I'm not saying Subspace is a badly designed character, he's just not built for opens, and that's honestly okay. I just thought it is hilarious how in opens, he is almost not appreciated enough at all and insanely difficult to use well, primarily due to the environment of opens almost never favoring him at all unless you run very specific teammates, which are already great in their own right and don't necessarily need Subspace's vulnerability and chip damage to do their job effectively, and can more benefit off of a different character like Biograph. He is simply just a teamwork character, and as I stated like 5 times, teamwork in open servers is incredibly difficult. So, I may have just trashed Subspace for a lot of this video, and I do admit, while I think he is the most fun character for me to play, he is unanimously the worst opens character in the game. And again, that is okay. So, after all I just said, how does he function in the more fast-paced and competitive environment of scrims and fighting? Well, how about being one of the best characters in the game and constantly being considered top 3 in the game? Let me explain. In scrims, the map pool has some maps banned either due to them being unfun like Space Knights, having map elements being too intrusive like Hotel Elephant, or just straight up not being good maps like Nuke the Whales, or Space Knights again. Along with these map bans, around 85 to 90% of games in scrims will play on Conquer, the most popular mode in the game as it offers the most balanced experience and most fun one a lot of the time. The other 10 to 15% of these games are played on Annihilate, which isn't as balanced as Conquer, but does offer a very unique way of the game due to its focus on kills. And no, Escort is not included as the game mode itself is not well designed. Oh, and people will try to use actually good team compositions, so there's way less variables to worry about, as people will be on the same mindset of trying to win. On Annihilate, Subspace is pretty much a bottom tier, usually being grouped with Vinestaff as the worst Annihilate character for a bunch of reasons like opens. He is too vulnerable, his positives don't matter much in the game mode, and a lot of the characters that can shred him are also top tier and common picks on this game mode in scrims, like Skateboard, Slingshot, Biograph, and many others. He is decent against banana comps, but let's be real, Subspace is still vulnerable into those types of comps, and other great anti-characters like Scythe still do insanely well against them. And he is a decent pick on Chaos Canyon, except every single character is at least decent on Chaos Canyon, even a Vinestaff. And on the other maps, yeah, he is god-awful outside of maybe bunkering on Laundromat, but if you are bunkering on Laundromat, you practically already lost a game or have better options to use. So yeah, he is bad on Annihilate, but what about the 85 to 90% played mode of Conquer? Well, he is commonly considered the best character in the entire game. So, Conquer is a lot different from Annihilate in scrims. Tanks are absolutely necessary, dives are great picks to deal with supports, teamwork and team play are great to have, and it's so intricate that I have to simplify a lot of this. Subspace is a defining Conquer character, primarily due to many aspects, and the best part is against the tanks. Banhammer and Katana are some of the best Conquer characters thanks to their tank roles and being able to hold down points perfectly, along with being great against dive characters and being the main focus to gun down. If you can't kill the tank, you almost can't win the game. This is why tanks are so important, and I am just simplifying this. Subspace is the easiest and most effective way of killing tanks, as vulnerability and poison soften up tanks greatly to dispatch of them. And since Subspace is also the most accessible option of these characters, he is widely consistent in this role. This especially gives your own tank a huge advantage in tank 1v1s, as this is a common situation you'll find yourself in, and Sub makes your own tank far better into it. Along with this, he can function as many other things. He is a great character if you want to get consistent point presence, as he is often great for locking up the point from tanks, and due to being only health, he can function as an ult charge battery for medkit or vine staff thanks to him constantly needing healing. It can be a downside on comps involving healerless subspace, but with medkit, it's pretty valuable due to how strong medkit is with his ult. But even on healerless comps, he can still function pretty well. His passive allows him to function with aggressive comps thanks to the healing on assist, and combined with his poison scaling with vulnerability and overall chip damage, it makes melee threats more able to dive and range threats more able to completely eviscerate targets. He has more synergies too, as some of his best synergies come with characters like Boombox and Coil being able to anti-dive and help support Subspace from being dived, or synergize their ults together for devastating combos if done right. And because of the landscape of Conquer not incentivizing kills, dying as Subspace isn't as important, and dives aren't as scary to fight as you can still stall him out with M2 and E pretty well. It can still do your job if you stay on point or even bait enemies off the point to go for you. Now, I am definitely skimping on a lot of things and I'm being insanely simple with what Sub can be good with, but I cannot underestimate how amazing Sub is on Conquer and how vital he could be to some comps. You could skip on running him, but he is just so consistent a lot of the time. And while Rocket can potentially be a better tank killer at times, Subspace has things Rocket can't do and vice versa. Now, because of Conquer being a popular mode with a total of 16 possible maps to play on, maybe Subspace has some weak maps, or maybe he is just very strong on a couple of maps. Well, try being insanely strong on at least 10 Conquer maps in the game, with a few even considering you almost a mandatory character. That's insane! Granted, maps like Teapots don't mandate Subspace, but the opportunity cost and loss of several things that Sub can grant to your team can make it a big commitment to not go Sub, which is why they are often seen as, quote, sub-mandate maps. And even on his worst maps like Arcade and Bandland, Subspace is still fine to have because tank busting is such a valuable role, and Subspace can still have some use in avoiding threats on these maps. And his synergies still apply, albeit to a lesser extent than usual. And also, Arcade is a dogshit map no one picks, never play it. I guess the only weakness Sub could really have is the fact he is such a high value target that he would often be the one target everyone will completely dispatch of as quickly as they can. But that's not necessarily a problem. It's more of a sign as to how controlling Subspace is. So, you might be asking, why is this comparison so important? Well, Subspace being bad in opens yet so amazing in scrims just shows what type of character Subspace is. In an independent driven environment like opens, Sub can't fend for himself and pales in comparison from everyone else. Scrims, being very team focused, allow Sub to be a complete menace and almost make you think that he is broken, or maybe he actually keeps the dominant tanks and Conquer in check actually. He is kind of in this weird spot that he is balanced, but also technically not balanced. It's so weird. And hell, if you really wanted to change him, the only thing you could really do is nerf his HP a bit, but that's a whole different conversation that I don't want to step into because that's not what this video is about at all. Subspace is, in a way, both a balanced and insane character in many different ways, while also providing some sort of balance against a few characters, and that's what makes competitive fighting so engaging. In a controlled environment with people knowing what they are doing, characters unleash their full potential and start to show how incredible they can be, and how other characters will start to fall off or have new ways to function thanks to better teamwork and structuring within the players. Obviously, as I said, in an open server, characters like Subspace and Boombox would never be seen as scary, but in scrims, they truly do have an insane effect as we know it and have been proven before by many teams in many ways, and that's absolutely beautiful to see. But the fact Sub is so extremely different between both environments as the worst and the best in many unique and small ways is what makes him such an incredible character. He may not be the most well-rounded or most flashy character, but he will forever be a very weird character to play as, and I absolutely love it. And please remove Arcade, oh my god,